Every entry in the Fire Emblem franchise is someone's favorite. This video series aims to find out why. Fire Emblem Blazing Blade is the 7th entry in the franchise and the first released outside of Japan. It's no exaggeration to say that the fate of the series as a whole rested on its shoulders. If it had failed, the series could have returned to being a Japanese exclusive, or worse, killed the series altogether. Thankfully, it passed its test and has become a flagship series for Nintendo, receiving mainline entries on major consoles, like the Switch. From its approachability to new players, to its in-depth, character-driven stories, let's examine what makes Fire Emblem Blazing Blade the best entry in the franchise. Lyn mode acts as a tutorial for those who are new to the game and to the franchise in general. It holds the player's hand through most of it, explaining mechanics as they become relevant, without overwhelming the player with too much all at once. Some games in the series can be overwhelming for first-time players. Key units can die within a couple of hits. Enemies can spawn when you least expect them. And some gameplay elements may leave the player confused. Offering the player a challenge is part of what makes these games fun to replay, but for a first-time player, it may be a bit off-putting. Blazing Blade takes the opposite approach by starting off spoon-feeding knowledge to the player until it turns them loose in Eliwood and Hector modes to show the game what they've learned. For the players who want the game to take the kid gloves off a little bit, the game offers different difficulty settings. Each of the 3 main game modes has a normal mode and a hard mode for a total of 6 different modes, with difficulty ranging from you have to be trying to lose to you better plan things well in advance. Hard mode for Lyn's Tale simply turns off the tutorial helps, while the hard mode for Eliwood's Tale makes enemies more difficult and more plentiful, while experience gains from combat are decreased. Although the differences between normal and hard for Lyn and Eliwood modes aren't too big, the difference between Hector's Tale's normal and hard is quite the leap. In addition to the changes mentioned in Eliwood hard mode, Hector hard mode takes things a step further by limiting the number of units the player can deploy in any given chapter. From the beginner to the pro, Blazing Blade features something for everyone. In addition to these difficulty settings, this game also features a ranking system. The player is judged in how well they perform in 5 different categories. Tactics, which is how many turns taken to complete the game. Survival, which is determined by how many player-controlled characters die. Funds, which measures the value of any assets the player has on hand. Experience, which is, of course, how many experience points the player gained in total. And combat, which is a ratio of how many battles the player's units participated in versus how many they won. The player receives a letter ranking at the end of their playthrough, with S being the highest rank, representing a perfect 5 stars in each category. However, in some ways, these 5 categories are at odds with each other. The Tactics rank encourages you to move quickly, but the Experience rank gives you incentive to stick around for a while and let your units defeat enemy reinforcements. The Combat rank wants you to defeat enemies efficiently, but the Funds rank wants you to hoard your best equipment and items. Balancing these 5 criteria adds an interesting dynamic to the player's playstyle. It forces you to play the game in a way you might not otherwise. When paired with the 6 game modes available, rankings offer the player plenty of ways to test themselves. Blazing Blade is a prequel to the 6th entry in the franchise, The Binding Blade. While the main story of Binding Blade has the player running across the entire continent to fight in a huge war, Blazing Blade takes a more character-focused approach to its story. Embracing its status as a prequel, Blazing Blade introduces us to many characters who are related to characters from its predecessor. The main characters of the game, Hector and Eliwood, are of course the fathers of Roy and Lilina. While Binding Blade alludes to the fact that Roy and Lilina's fathers are friends, Blazing Blade gives us the chance to see that friendship firsthand. Eliwood, who seems prim and proper at all times, lets himself act a bit more casually when talking to Hector, while Hector, who comes across as a strong man unafraid of anything, lets his guard down around Eliwood. Zephiel and Guinevere, two important figures in Binding Blade's war, are introduced as children in Blazing Blade, with more backstory added. It is here that we first see Zephiel's father, and see his disdain for his own son, which Binding Blade tells us is a primary factor in Zephiel's turn to villainy. After the attempted assassination of Zephiel, orchestrated by his father, his mother has this heartfelt moment where she tells him she loves him and wants to be a better mom. Given the events of Binding Blade, we know things didn't turn out great, but it adds a bit of hope that otherwise isn't there. Rather than treat the Byrne royal family's situation as a lost cause, and Zephiel's descent into madness as a foregone conclusion, Blazing Blade pauses to humanize them. Blazing Blade also introduces us to other characters relevant to Binding Blade, such as Pent and Louise, the parents of Klein and Clarine. Merlinus, who starts out as a merchant serving Eliwood and ends up as his son's advisor. Bartray, Carla, and Carol, who are Fur's parents and uncle, respectively. And Canis, the son of Nime, the mountain hermit, and father of Hugh. With 44 playable characters available, the game simply doesn't have time to give each one a fleshed-out role in the story. To remedy this, Blazing Blade gives the player details about these characters in the form of support conversations. By having ally units end turns adjacent to each other, the allies can build support points. Although the list of units any given ally can support is limited, supports give the player access to additional stat bonuses and unique conversations. It's through these conversations that we learned details about these units, such as Dart's reason for joining Fargus's crew, being that Fargus saved his life and that Dart lost his memory. Or that Urk, the uptight mage from Lin Mode, is a student of Pent, the mage general. Or that Renault, the bishop you recruit in the second-to-last chapter of the game, was a volunteer for Nurgle's experiments. Blazing Blade balances its character development by focusing on a smaller group of main characters, but giving additional characterization to minor characters through these support conversations. This game also features the first introduction of a self-insert character for the player. Up to this point in the franchise, the player simply observed the story through the lens of their TV screen. But Blazing Blade gives the player the role of tactician in the story, informing the player that the commands they give to their units are, in fact, canon. Rather than being a nameless witness to your army's victory, suddenly the player is standing right next to Lyn, reveling in the success of reclaiming her homeland. Although the tactician's role in the story is minimal, it makes the plot feel a bit more personal. While the player can name them whatever they want, the default name is Mark. In addition, the player can also choose their gender and their birth month. Though the tactician's impact on gameplay is ultimately minimal, some players argue that it's better this way. Some say that other entries in the franchise put too much importance on the player's character, leading to confusion as to whether it's the main lord or the player's character that's supposed to be the main character. Blazing Blade avoids this problem by giving the player a role in the story, but making that role a background plot point, allowing the game to properly focus on the character stories it wants to tell. If all of this isn't enough to convince you, consider Blazing Blade's impact to the community. It's hard to deny that we've gotten some real gems out of this game over the years. That's gotta count for something, right? But perhaps most importantly of all, for many fans, self included, it was our introduction to the franchise. Blazing Blade was the game that put Fire Emblem on the map for me. Because of that, it will always hold a special place in my heart.